Hey everyone, I'm going to wait just a second here while we give people a chance to join, but really excited for this one. So I'm gonna give it a second here. I'm gonna sip on my chai since this is Guys and Chai. Okay, wow. A lot of people joining already. And I'm really excited for this one for lots of different reasons. And I'm going to talk about a couple things around this series, around the idea here, and then I'll get into introducing Amish, who's going to be our guest tonight. So, Guys and Jai, storytelling, social hour, happy hour. This was a concept that we started back in June. It was Men's Mental Health Month, and the idea here was to develop a space for people to tell their story. And we did this. The initial event was in person here in Chicago, and in collaboration with a great organization called Chicago Kasum. And it really turned out to be a success, where we heard from two South Asian men who shared their story, shared their mental health journey, and really just connected with other folks in the South Asian community here. And there was a lot of anxiety on my end of things in terms of how's it going to go, what's going to be the reaction to this, and it was really positive. So this really has been an idea that has been on my mind for some time, but I'm really glad that we worked with Chicago Kasum in June to put this on. And so now we are continuing this series here, and I hope to continue this both online in this format, as well as in person. To me, storytelling is an integral part of therapy and the therapeutic process. Storytelling does not require a professional to hear you out, right? We are a society of stories. And so, when we tell our story, there is a validation to that process, there is power to that process. And we really get to establish how we feel about things. We get to reflect on what happened, and we get to find ways to move forward. And so for that reason, I'm really excited to have our guest on today. And I want to just talk very briefly about him in just a second. But the idea of these, if you didn't see the post before, or didn't see our post earlier in the summer, the idea of these is that this is a real and raw conversation. So typically with our guest back in June, and with Amish as well, we had a brief conversation, got to know each other, and so I know a little bit about him, but we're really going to have a chance to have an open dialogue today. There's no scripted questions. There's no specific focus points that we have to get to. The idea is he's going to get to share his story, one that is about him being a South Asian man, and his mental health journey after the death of his parents. And so it's a weird word, excited, when it's such a hard and heavy topic sometimes. But I think for me, as a therapist and a professional in the field, it really empowers and energizes me to hear people's stories, and in whatever way they come out. And so I'm really excited to have Amish join us here. And so I'm going to invite him in. And not everybody has to have chai, but I've got my chai. Amish is here. Amish, how you doing? You got your chai? Well, cheers.
Cheers, Ankur.
Well, let's start with the chai, because I know we were texting earlier, and I was like, have a mug if you can. And you shared what chai you were going to be drinking. Tell us about that. Let's start there, and then we'll go.
Yeah, Um, Again, thanks for having me, Ankur. Appreciate number one the space you're creating, but to the chai, it's actually a really tricky and sort of tough subject for me. Um, you know, growing up, my mom is a chai fanatic,
Mm,
and even making a cup today was pretty hard. And Yeah, so I'm drinking her recipe.
mm,
I would uh, make it uh, for her, after school in high
mm.
school. Um, my dad would always laugh. He would say, uh, make sure you get a cup of chai ready for her, so she cools off, even though
Yeah.
the cup was hot in and of itself. But yeah, so I'm drinking a cup that has a lot of pictures of her from a cup that my sister gave me. Um, but yeah, no, I'm glad. I appreciate deeply the space you're creating today,
Yeah.
especially for South Asian men, especially for this topic around grief. You know,
Yeah.
so again, appreciate you.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you agreed to do this. I know we've talked about a couple different ideas around your story and
Yeah,
around things that you've done in this last year or so, and we're going to have time to get into all of that. Um, and I'm just to share, I'm drinking my dadi's chai recipe, which my bua created all these packets after she passed last year and distributed them to the family and during the different pujas and ceremonies that we had afterwards. And
awesome.
so I know how special something like chai can be in not just taking us back to our childhood in the way that you described, but remembering the people that we shared that experience with. And so I'm looking forward to you sharing more about that. I want to take a step back for just a
Sure.
second, so that I know there's. So actually, I want to share something that's a little funny because I posted this morning about this live, and then I went to work and I had clients from like 8:30 until just about an hour ago, and so I've not been really online.
Yeah.
And I sat down at my desk and I like called. My wife was over in the other room, and I'm like 145 likes. Like I was blown away how many people have responded so quickly just today to this story and to this event. And really I think that shows the power of exactly what we're doing here, which is to give a platform to tell your story. And so a lot of people have already joined. People will join as we go. Sometimes people will have comments, questions. You can share those if you're listening in, and if we have some time we might address those, but we'll get into it here. And one thing that I want to, I've been thinking a lot about is, how do we start conversations? How do we introduce people? Because people have so many layers,
Yeah.
so much history. And, a lot of times, especially in our community, one of the first questions is, what do you do? And it's always about
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thing is like, oh, are you married? Do you have kids? So I want to know about those things, but I want to first, Amish, tell us who you are outside of your career, outside of work. Who are you?
Yeah. I love that you're calling those things out because it becomes often so much of our layer of who we are that is asked of us that really is just superficial, even though really meaningful, but core beyond that. I am, I've started to use this term, but I am a grieving son of
Hmm.
uh, incredible uh, immigrant parents. Grew up in Skokie,
Hmm.
so shout out to that side of the world. Um, and you know, um, and really core to who I am, and early on um, was the introduction of spirituality
Hmm.
and really a community that. Um, you know, connected me to ideas around,
Mm.
uh, you know, thinking about divinity and what that means in from a lens of, you know, as a young kid to, you know, high school. So that's core to my identity for sure. You know, and then of course, uh, like I said, son, brother, you know, a partner to my wife, a father to two fun, crazy, amazing kids. Uh, so those are, I would say, core. I'm
How
a
how old are your
diehard, yeah.
kids?
About to be four, my youngest, Jeeve, and my daughter, Dia,
Mm.
about to be seven too.
Oh, well.
Um, and so core, those are core things to who I am, uh, as well as I'm a, you know, I love to have respite. And I think I call this out, you know, sports lover around watching and playing. Um, you know, I think a curious person at kind of core from my studies to, you know, to sort of all that. And then I think, you know, lens of trying to, you know, from early on, have diverse experiences to just, I think, grow myself, um, whether that means here in the States, abroad, whatever that look like. So I think those are some things. I don't know if
Yeah,
that kind of answers the question, but yeah, that's who I
yeah.
am. And then, of course, I think the questions you probably, you know, asked about, which is, what do you do? I am a physician, a doc, and you know, really centered around caring for vulnerable populations and communities. So
Yeah.
that's kind of core to me too.
Right. Yeah, and absolutely, and it's not to dismiss the work because the work is, and I know the work that you do is especially, seems like an extension of your personality, of what you care about, what you're passionate about,
Yeah,
and so that's a beautiful thing. Um, So, you and I connected right after the first Guys and Chai event back in June.
yeah,
And what one thing that I was struck by immediately was right away you got into your story. And and then you talked a little bit about how you've been processing your grief and how you've been working through that. And in just a short few minutes, you know, I felt the energy, right? I felt the energy of both your grief, but also the passion that you have, that has developed maybe in the last, however many months or so. And so, I want to just give you a chance now, however you'd like, wherever you'd like to start, um, to talk about that. What, and maybe a good place to start, or something to touch on, is also what you thought about mental health before you got really invested in your own mental health. So, but I want to leave it open ended for you to just start your story wherever feels good.
yeah. I appreciate it. I think, you know, again, first appreciating the space you're creating. Second, I wanted to share this this eerie feeling too, which is in sharing this story, which I think is so important. I also hate that I'm doing it, right? In some
Mm,
shape and form, which, but I mean that I wish I wasn't had gone through the tragedy,
yeah,
right? That we sort of lived through. Um, at the same time, I think I know grief is love, you know, too,
yeah,
and it's a human experience. And so, uh, you know, for me, I think you know, sharing, you know, that this experience is, I think, important for probably a number of reasons. One, it's cathartic, like you said earlier,
mm,
and two, you know, I think in sharing, uh, um, you know, um, you know, you sort of give and get in that, right?
hmm,
So I think those things. I think your first question, or maybe the latter question, answer first, which is like my experience around mental health. You know, sort of prior to my journey in grief. I I think I never saw um, you know or experienced it firsthand
Mm,
personally, but I had people close to me that had, and and most probably closest was with patients, right?
mm-hmm.
Countless patients,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, you know, the so that's I think probably or answering your latter question. I think the and I see some comments around what is the story. Starting in 2022, my father was diagnosed with a kind of end stage lung condition, or we
Mm,
knew that there was kind of one option, which is transplant. And uh, in that sort of anticipatory grief process, we went to transplant centers, left
mm,
kind of no stone unturned. Um, we were sort of grappling with, as a family, individually, we were, grappling with anticipatory grief for my father while,
mm,
um, January 5th, 2023, my mom was taking her respite, you know, caring for my dad, and I had just took her walk, which she loved, uh, and was just walking through a pedestrian crosswalk and got struck, and we
mm,
lost her. I was traveling for work at the time.
mm,
It was a traumatic experience for my sister, traumatic for myself, traumatic for our family, my wife, the kids, you know, my mom's sister, family, everybody. And we were just in survival mode, and then my father, we did everything we could to keep him, you know, upright with from a he would have um, you know traumatic things that would wake him up in the middle of the night, feeling like he
mm,
was itching, or
mm.
obviously anxiety. All of us had panic attacks, um, PTSD, trauma,
Yeah.
from what that event sort of caused, and had to sort of sit in the shittiness of everything, right?
Mm,
And then before getting into, I think, the meat of it all, of that, cared for my dad, who needed all of us and others, and he ended up actually, I think, staying around longer, maybe fighting for us, fighting to be around
mm,
for us, and then he, in really November, got his sort of final kind of
mm,
trajectory of all this roller coaster ride of thinking that maybe he'll get out of it.
mm,
And then he passed in December of 2023. So January 2023 and December 2023 kind of bookended
mm,
our year with the loss. And so, um, through that, you know, finding space, making space for it, making space for the grief, people that were able to, I think sort of two types of people, finding kind of your people in this.
mm,
I think obviously people that have experienced loss, experienced and every loss is different, but experienced losing, was able to gravitate to them, and also people that just kind of knew how to sit. I use this phrase a lot, kind of sit in the shit with you, right? And just
yeah.
be, and not try to, you know, take you in a direction that,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, so that, and then therapy, without a doubt.
Well,
And yeah,
actually, if we can pause,
yeah,
because
absolutely. Absolutely.
I wanna sit in the shit with you for a second here,
Yeah.
because what you've shared, is first, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
you started off by talking about how hard this is, and in some ways how much you hate that you have to do this, right? What a what an unimaginable experience that you and your family and your community, right, went through. When we lose somebody, it impacts so many
Oh yeah.
in so many different ways, and so I'd like to just, if we can, before we go forward, just pause to honor um, that loss, those losses, and, and as we proceed to take your time through it.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Um, it's interesting. There's people that were uh, texting or posting, I think, around strength and even often, we would have older generation folks saying himmat rakho, right?
Mm.
Things like that. I think there's just
Stay
call
strong.
out this
Stay
trip.
strong for
Yeah,
those who need the
yeah,
translation.
yeah. Stay strong for those. I think there's so much strength also in what you just did, right? And strength in just being vulnerable, um, and saying that you're not okay. Yeah, I think that's hard. Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
so I think strength comes in a lot of different modalities, um,
absolutely.
and so yeah, without a doubt. So I appreciate you kind of pausing as well. I think time in so many ways stopped for a lot of us. For
Yeah.
me, sort of I use this like sort of analogy too of like the Earth's axis sort of tilted. You kind of see
Mm.
life, you experience things dramatically different. Um, so I think knowing that for people that have had loss, knowing that for your either friends or family, um, I think is
Mm.
sort of awareness around that for sure.
Yeah. And I can see people in the comments too who are feeling the weight of your story, the weight of your grief, the weight of your emotion here too. And so I want to recognize those people too, because there are
Yeah,
people here listening, watching, who have
yeah,
experienced some similar things and in their own ways. And so,
yeah,
yeah. Um, can you talk a little bit about the response, right? The response of the community, of your family, and in the South Asian community, sometimes family and community are the same, right? We have
yeah.
family friends and we have
Oh
people
yeah,
who we've known just as long as, our own blood. And can you talk a little bit about what that response was, both the challenges and, the strengths that you found in that?
yeah. Starting with the strength, there's, I mean, this sort of feeling that everyone kind of rushes in the beginning
Mm,
and just
mm,
kind of holds you up. Like it was um, so uh, supportive. Um, the family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, everyone. Um, and I think there is some intentionality that happens in that. In our family tradition and spiritual tradition, there was sort of like 12, 13 days of prayer. Everyone's in the house. Everyone's, there. So that was definitely a strength. I think, uh, the strength of, um, when uh, there's sort of some rituals too,
mm.
that allows you to almost sometimes not think, but do. And some of those there's strength in too, but there's mix in that even too, of course, right? Sometimes you just want to go and be by yourself and go be alone,
Yeah.
and it's hard. But I think that. in the beginning was so strong. I think there is this sort of like 2 or 3 month void
Mm,
post where there's a lot less, um, of that because um, I remember feeling that, and I remember the strength of the people that were able to just text randomly or call or show up or those were so supportive for me,
mm,
so supportive for all of us. Um, so those are, I think, definitely strengths. I think of um, some of the mixed challenges of um, people knowing that um, there are things that, especially often some of the older generation, like I said, I think that it said the himatrakos, be
mm,
strong, or like some spiritual bypassing, this term that I learned, which, is um, almost finding some sort of, you know, spin, the spiritual spin or positive. And I was like, just, I just need to hear, I just need a shoulder to
mm,
cry on. I don't need to
mm.
hear, anything else. But often and I realized over time, often this is, it's, it's hard.
Mm.
People don't know what to say, and that's okay. People don't know. I didn't know what to say,
Yeah.
before, and I get it. And so I think some of those some of those things I think are both powerful. There was something around like sutak, this term. I don't know if that's common for everyone, but just this idea of like observing um, without kind of over celebrating for a period of time, and actually there was dynamics that was really helpful
Mm.
in that too. And so there's a lot of things that I think we have from a norms and community and family perspective that are strengths, and things that you just have to have someone else to sort of lean in on as a ear and say, hey, that didn't feel good to me, but and I understand maybe that's
Yeah.
why. So those
Can you
are, I
can
think,
you
things.
talk
Yeah,
about I want to hear a little
sure.
bit more about the sutta, like the not
Yeah,
over celebrating. What did that provide? A little. Can you talk a little bit about just what that was or how that
yeah.
was, you know,
Yeah,
portrayed?
yeah, it was almost this like unwritten feeling
Mm,
for several of our family, and being in kind of big spaces or celebrations or things that just didn't feel like the world is that your life and your moment in time has kind of stopped,
mm,
and to almost like honor and observe that,
yeah.
and as like this sort of and it helped, and at times it was okay to be open to feeling other emotions, be open to. Yeah, I remember the first time where I went to my son or daughter's like a birthday party at school, and
Mm,
I just remember running around with my son and just jumping around at like this, it's called altitude, this jumping
yeah.
place, and it felt I was open to the emotion of going and doing that, and I felt seeing my son happy, feeling a different emotion. The first time, probably I laughed again, right?
Mm,
And but also being open to those other emotions, um, and I think that's also really important too. Is because I think grief, you know, I think shutting it off or closing it off is my own experience. I try to not do that and welcome it in because it's going to make a home whether you like it or
yeah.
not. I think that's,
Yeah.
sort of my experience. But having grace for yourself, you know, feeling like when it's okay not to be okay, and then also
Mm,
feeling like you want to just, see what another emotion will feel like, and being okay with that too.
yeah.
Um, and so I think learning to carry it
Right.
has been, really, really important.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something that's really important, right? We've heard this statement that's so important for people when they don't feel like themselves, when
Yeah,
they don't feel okay. That
yeah,
validation that, hey, it's okay to not feel okay. But sometimes we forget about that part where it's like it's okay to
yeah,
laugh. It's okay to feel
yeah,
happiness or joy in the
yeah,
midst of such
yeah,
hardship, right? And it sounds like for you and your son and it was almost necessary, right,
yeah,
to
yeah,
have those moments, right? It's hard to just stay in, like, you got to sit in the shit, but it's hard to stay in the shit, right?
yeah. Without a doubt, there's this. I listened to this podcast, All There Is, by
Mm,
Anderson Cooper, and sort of calls out lots of different stories
mm,
around grief. There's one I remember. Um, I think Elizabeth something, who had two kids, young kids, lost her spouse
mm,
tragically, suddenly, and then over time, sort of this statement, ended up losing her father later, but this
mm,
statement her father would carry, it's like, also have to live. How do you live your beautiful life, baby?
mm,
And this idea that there's sort of a mix, right? Riding the waves when you need to ride the waves are coming, and you want them, and then having also anchors of often that's my kids, um, and being silly with them, experiencing other emotions, experiencing other parts of life that I don't want to miss out on, which, making space for the grief. There's my therapist, give this, I remember early on, gave this image of the two jars, the
mm,
grief jar, and it's, I think, everywhere. But the idea that the grief, the ball, the size, it stays the same, but your
mm,
jar, gets bigger and grows,
mm,
and so it doesn't minimize the grief, it doesn't minimize your love. There's like not a moment that I can't experience something from my you know childhood parents' life with them. And I also believe I believe this. There's so many signs, so many things that um, my physical relationship, yes, has ended, um, but my relationship with them has not ended. Um,
mm.
and I think that was really important for me to sort of anchor into, how I uh, you know instill in my kids, how we talk to my parents, often every day as part of a ritual, um, how the kids, every evening will give them a hug, and remind them of things that remind me of them as well. And so, um, yeah, I think I think those rituals have been really
Yeah,
important too for me with
I
the
gotta
kids.
I gotta say, as a therapist, I have to, kind of regulate my emotions, for my work, and I also want to, recognize that, I still have feelings, and what you just said really hit me right in the heart, in terms of, talking about how your relationship with them continues.
Yeah,
That's extremely powerful framing of, you know, a loss like that. So I love that way that you shared that.
thanks.
You,
Yeah,
you mentioned your therapist.
yeah,
Um, can you talk a little? And I love the jar um, analogy as well, right? That sometimes when we lose a loved one, right? We at the beginning the feelings are hard and heavy and often, and over time, right, those feelings dissipate a little bit, or don't hit in the same ways. And a lot of times, sometimes people feel some sort of guilt or something around, like, hey, I didn't think about this person as much as I did before, or I forgot this thing, right? And I think it's such a hard part about this grief process, right?
yeah.
That, it changes, it evolves, and, those emotional um, experiences change and evolve. And so I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about that process where, when you started, both with your therapist, but I know that you've worked to process this grief in different ways, in creative ways. If you can share a little bit about that aspect of this grief journey.
Yeah. 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 I think, you know, consistent space with a therapist. She's again was also important to me, and may not be for everyone, but um, found a South Asian therapist that I think resonated for me with just dynamics that I think we spoke about. Um, I think y- you know writing has been something before for me. And just writing um, in a journal when it comes up, and pretty regularly in the beginning, and making space in the morning for it.
Mm,
I think space to have for myself, space to have for my thoughts and grief, and having dedicated space for that. um, you know Pretty early on, uh, I think I mentioned this earlier, there was people that found, and also people that found me, I think.
mm,
And there was a group of, you know, dads through my daughter's school that I got coffee with pretty regularly, that lost a parent, lost their dad, and that was important space for me, to finding, I think, spaces. Uh, um, I think, you know, um, as I mentioned, I think the pieces around the kids, um, as well. But I think just making space in different ways, being,
yeah.
finding outlets of creativity. There's songs that my mom would sing that I
Mm,
sing to the kids, and it's both really painful, but you know. Um, is sort of ways to feel like there's a continuation, right,
important. Yeah.
of things. Yeah.
How how did the coffee with the other dads start? Like, how did that initiate? Because I think,
Yeah.
one of the things that I hear a lot from people who are not sure where to start is like, who do I talk to? How do I even initiate that conversation? And we're not even talking about getting in for therapy, just like starting to just even talk about those things that are maybe bottled up or not, where we
Yeah.
don't have the words for that. So how did you connect with those other dads, and what was that first conversation or that decision like to say, hey, let's get coffee and talk about our, talk about our parents, talk about the losses that we've experienced.
Yeah. I think when folks will, when there's a bit of step of vulnerability, um, there's then a door that's opened. And
Mm,
so whether that's, one person, whether it's you or whether it's the other person, feels like a door
mm,
becomes open. And I found that with some of my with some of my best friends, and then I found it with complete people that I just sort of met. And these were the several dads that were part of my daughter's classroom, and they said, "Hey, anytime you want to grab a coffee, grab this." I was like, "Yeah, actually, I'll take you up on it." And sometimes you know, um, there's also so much history and so much with people that for so long, that
mm,
often sometimes it's even harder, right? I think from people that, like I said, I think the idea of vulnerability opened up doors. And then once that door opened, I didn't shy away from jumping
yeah,
in.
yeah,
And I think that was helpful for me.
yeah. And I think that's a great way to put it, right? Because once the door is just even cracked open,
Yeah.
sometimes that's all it really takes, to realize,
Yeah.
hey, there's something here,
Yeah.
that's worth sharing or worth connecting over. Um, we had a comment in here that I wanted to get to because it's kind of aligned with
Sure.
what I was thinking. Archibald says, "Must be so hard to be strong for all the people who depend on you, kids, siblings, and also managing the logistics of everything that comes with, the
Yeah.
loss of a
Yeah.
parent." Um, can you talk? You mentioned singing to your kids. We've talked about passing things on. How did you kind of navigate the emotional aspect, and how do you continue to do so? And then, if there's anything to share about, the logistics of it, or anything else that, remains that maybe sometimes we don't think about, that we don't know about,
Yeah.
around this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Uh, the responsibility piece, I think, where I'm sensing is, uh, the feeling that how do you still show up for, especially little humans that
Mhm.
have nervous systems that I mean, I would cry uh, almost every other day with my kids, my daughter especially. She would comfort me. She
Mm,
still does. And I think it's okay, really okay, to do that because it shows that they can be vulnerable too, right?
mm,
So I think, but the managing of responsibilities is something I'm still figuring out, and I will keep trying to figure out. Uh, I not everyone has the privilege to also, when you have big life events like catastrophic. Uh, I think if you go to probably typical HR stuff, it's like what bereavement is X amount of
mm,
days,
mm,
which I think is often pretty offensive when you think about it.
mm, mm,
And most people don't
mhm,
have the privilege to take a step back.
mhm,
Will say I did, and first and foremost, that was taking care of the responsibility that I had right away, which was taking care of my dad alongside my sister, alongside other family, and I had the privilege to be able to take a step back to fulfill that responsibility, and also actually
mm.
have space for the grief. But not everyone has that, which is really, I
Yeah.
think, really hard. I think also the idea that uh, when um, you when you have to navigate a lot of logistics of stuff that is related to loss, leaning in on others that have unfortunately have had to go through it. I leaned in on some of my closest friends to others around logistics and responsibilities that just have to certain things that have to be done, and then also realizing that there's certain things that don't have to be done, and
Mm,
often we rush through them, rush through the stuff related to whether personal stuff or things like that. Like there's often there doesn't need to be a rush, and I think just knowing, and being open to how you're feeling and how you're able to do the responsibilities that actually have to be done, and then ones
yeah.
that don't, letting them letting them be, and
Mm,
knowing that there's no time. Like I think one thing that was really important for me to remember is like grief is, uh, like I said, love, and my love and continuation is going to be there. So there's that. It's not something that I need to quickly get
yeah.
through or go through.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
carrying it. I'm carrying, in it always. And so knowing that, I think, helped me also understand. And then again, so many people, and leaning in on community, leaning in on those that either have gone through something that you can get support through, of just how to do logistics related to loss.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Amish, we, you and I just met a few months ago, and so, um, we've talked a lot about how you've processed grief, how you've moved through this, last almost 2 years, right? Um, and I wanted to take actually, a minute here to, actually, if you can share anything about your parents, one or two things that we should all carry with us about them, about the impact that they've made on you, on the people in their lives. A fun memory, any qualities about them, anything that you're able to share. I'd love to hear a little bit about them and who they are.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure I'll cry, so bear with me. Um,
Absolutely.
I'll start with my um, father, um, Harish, and this was actually one thing that I learned, through actually that podcast of like asking the name
Mm,
uh, of the person. Um, there's a level of care to that, and so um, Harish, uh, the first thing that I think connects to actually today a little bit is, you know, he was a pretty emotionally available dad. Um, yeah, and it humanizes them. Uh, Pretty emotionally available, um, which is often wild to think of that in that generation. And I mean, there's so many things to say. Incredibly, um, you know, devoted to spirituality and his own growth. Incredibly committed to his family. Um,
mm,
Hard work is like um, what he did, and the immigrant story, which I think many of us here, the sort of courage, selflessness, uh, it is, you know, often shocking, and is beyond comprehension. So
yeah.
um, he's uh, he's someone who loves cards, cricket, carom,
Mm,
um, and and was a really good, um, eloquent kind of speaker, and was able to sort of write beautifully. Um, right now in our house, we have this the exact words he would write at the end of cards, whether it's birthdays, anniversaries, or
mm,
anything. Lots of love, and he would never write his name first. He would write mom/dad, and we have that kind of engraved there. Uh, he, yeah, that's probably all I can share. Otherwise, I'm going to go with him.
no, thank you for
My
that.
my mom. Sorry, good. Yeah.
No,
Um,
just thank you, and you had me really reminiscing, too, about my dad and my uncles, and I have
yeah.
an emotional dad as well,
Yeah.
and it's a powerful um, thing that you've learned from, a relationship that you learned from, a person that you learned from. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. My mom. It's still really hard to um, uh,
Take your time.
yeah. Yeah. So my mom lovingly was is called Renu.
Mm,
Um, uh, the other reason that the chai piece is hard, I forgot to mention, is she went for a walk that day. She said she'd be back for her cup of tea, and she never came back. And so, uh, mom was is like out of this sort of world personality. She incredible singer. Uh, I'm glad my my sister especially, but some of us got some of that talent. So I credit her. Uh, incredibly selfless, always put um, you know, never come to the dinner table until everyone else
Mm.
got fresh rotis first. Uh, I tell my wife all the time. I don't know how they, especially my mom, worked those many hours, cooked fresh food every day. They were, and she is another breed. Uh, incredibly strong. She like physically strong. She she would be hiking, biking.
Mm.
Uh, she went, as a 70-year-old to bike to vote, or 69-year-olds, no, 7-year-old, I forget what year exactly, but went to go bike to vote.
Wow.
Reminder for everyone on here to vote.
Hmm.
Um, but she was still biking at that age, incredibly physically strong, hiking always in front, climbing waterfalls.
Wow.
Um, she and so and what's really hard is that she had really nothing going on that
Mm.
still should be here, and that always troubles me. But she's I think of her all the time, and my especially my daughter, um, through my daughter as well as my son, I see personalities in both of them, and so it's really fun to see that. And whether it's the carefree nature of my son, who's like my mom in that way, to my daughter, who's like really can be particular and make sure she gets, her um, really has a incredibly sharp memory, like my dad.
Mm.
I see, I see them. I see that continuation as well. So, um, yeah, those are some things as much as I could share.
Yeah. We've had a couple comments, I think, from people in your life who have, you know, affirmed the
Yeah,
um, the powerful impact from both of your parents, and
yeah,
um, and this is the whole um,
yeah,
idea behind sharing our stories, because you were talking about your dad and I'm thinking about mine,
yeah,
and you're talking about your mom, and my mom's name is also Renu,
yeah,
and also, the last, I still have to fight with her sometimes, like sit down and eat with us, right? But the sacrifice that they make
yeah,
for us is something we'll never fully understand, we'll never fully know,
yeah,
but to be able to honor that in whatever ways we can, and to continue their legacy, their tradition that they've set for us, is just some of the ways that we can honor
yeah.
what they've meant to us, to the community that they were in. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, uh, like I said, I think this is crazy that I'm doing this, um, and uh, and it's cathartic when like I said, as well as hard, but important. I think texting someone earlier who went through a really kind of um, really similar tragedy, who was a really sounding year for me, and
Mm.
texting her just like I don't know if I, I don't know if I'm ready to be able to open up in this way, and I do it, of course, in smaller spaces, but um, trying. I know I can do that. and
Yeah.
um, and also I think knowing the importance of sharing my story, sharing our family story. Uh, there's things to, I think, hopefully can stick. I think things that, I the core things I want definitely people to leave with and myself to leave with again is like this idea that grief is a something you carry, and welcoming it.
Mm,
Often when we don't, um, it will find its way. Um, Two, I think finding your people, and your kind of flock of people that will be with you through this. And some of that, like I said, will come from you seeking it. Some of that will just come to you. Um, I think there's like a number of South Asian kind of, um, you know, both strengths
mm,
in our tradition and spiritual, you know, background.
mm,
And there's things that, uh, you know, that are mixed as well with how you face and how you come through it, and how you sort of engage with elements of our uh, you know just and how that comes out in different generations.
mm.
And then I think the last thing is you know just this idea of being vulnerable. And um, often, I remember early on, and for not early on, several months later, I would tell people when they would ask me how I'm doing, I would just straight up say I'm not doing too good.
Mm,
And
mm,
um, and then that I remember later people would tell me, I'm glad you told me. Um,
mm.
and I think the idea of being vulnerable, in your own journey, and the importance of that as well. But yeah, appreciate appreciate you, the space you're creating for people to be vulnerable with their stories. Um, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I have such gratitude for what you've done today, because I know that there are people who needed to hear your story, who didn't know they needed to hear that story. I needed to hear your story, because I think when we have these moments, it gives us such perspective. Um, and grief is this weird, all over the place kind of experience
Yeah,
sometimes. And it's really hard to explain, right? Because if grief is love, sometimes love, there are no words for love that describe love.
yeah,
You and I have talked for an hour, and it doesn't begin to
yeah,
really encapsulate the love that you carry for your parents, right? That is something beyond words,
yeah,
beyond what we can communicate just in our regular human ways. And so, this has really been, you know, when we started it in June and again today, there's a there's a sense for me at least of where is this going to go? How is this going to go? Um, Not a fear, not an anxiety, but just a curiosity, because we don't have these conversations.
yeah,
Who talks about these things so
yeah,
openly in such a vulnerable way, right? We've been conditioned in lots of ways to lock it up, right? Culturally, maybe, but
yeah,
societally, right? Like you
yeah,
talked about bereavement, like, okay, I got to go to work on Monday, right?
yeah,
So I got to lock it up. And then, the work that you do has its own grief, right?
yeah,
As part of that experience. And so what you've done today for the people who have tuned in, is again one of those beyond words experiences, because it connects. This is something we can all connect with. We will all experience
yeah,
grief. We have all experienced some grief. And so the way that I have seen both in my career and in my life is for us to share um, in that emotional experience as much as we can. And so I am beyond grateful to you for being so open and so vulnerable. And I can't imagine how this has been for you. And so I want to give you a chance if there's anything else you want to share, anything else that's coming to you right now, if you'd like to share that, and then we'll kind of start to uh, wrap up with the whole conversation.
Sounds good. I think I'm like sensing if I'm open to it or not. I was mentioning journal, and it's a pretty intimate um, sort of experience, and I think I'll share if that's all right.
Yeah.
Parts to it. There's I think one of the things that I remember after I tore my Achilles and I was going anticipatory kind of grief for my dad. I was with a physical therapist he gave me advice because he just lost his brother kind of suddenly. And his advice was like first of things are really hard. And kind of mark your calendar
Mm,
when you have kind of first, because those first will be hard. Um,
yeah.
whether it's the first kind of birthday, first anniversary, first whatever. And so I have kind of a little bit of a journal entry that was kind of something I wrote on my birthday this year.
Mm,
Wanted to get out of here, so we were in uh, out of Chicago and Maui, but I'll just read. Um, Mom and Dad, everything is beautiful, and mostly everything feels empty. I woke up today feeling more empty and nothing than sad. Dia yesterday told me, I have the best surprise gift for you, love. I then responded to her saying, uh, tomorrow, which is today, on my birthday, it's also your birthday, because if I wasn't born, you wouldn't be here. And that your Dada and Dadi must be here if I'm here. She smiled, also a bit confused at the idea. Um, Mom, my stomach is grumbling for a croissant. I wish it was Sara Lee, her favorite. I'll have one for you today. Dad, I'll have some oatmeal with some brown sugar for you. My birthday questions why I'm here. Still am here, so you both must be too. As we visit Haleakala, House of the Sun, how do I continue to be a son? Being a steward of your courageous values, projecting the light within me that you nourished so deeply. But who will be that ghee or that um, now? My first gut answer is the kids. Via and Jeeve are everything. I love them so much. Vicky's support, Karishma's relentless care, so many more family and friends. Yesterday, Mom and Dad, we climbed Black Rock and sent 2 lays into the ocean for you both. I hope you felt our love. I'm feeling yours in the wind, feeling your touch in the sand. Miss you both so damn much. Lots of love. Um, so,
mm.
yeah, I'll leave you with that. And no, again, glad can make the space. And really, again, Ankur, glad you're making a space for um, so many South Asian men in particular, just to have this space, right? Whether it's um, grief and their mental health, whether it's their own journey in mental health, you know, uh, really important. So again, appreciate you, man.
Well, um, that was extremely powerful, and and I want to just let's take a second here if we all can because you were getting lots of hearts and tear emojis, and so I think a lot of people are with you here in this moment, in this moment of memory and of sadness and of joy for the time that you did have, um, and so I want to just to you, Amish, and to everybody here who has been here for this ride, just encourage you to take a moment, after this, right now, to just sit, reflect, in both the peace of the moment and the emotion of the moment. Like I said, this is these are some of the stories that take the words away, and where things don't feel as meaningful or they don't seem the same as they might have been before that. And so um, I want to just express my greatest gratitude to you, what you've done. Like I said, and I feel like I'm just gonna keep repeating myself, but I really mean it in that what you've done is something very significant, in sharing this, with the world, with our world, whoever that's been, um, and and this is really what creates change, for the better. And so, on behalf of everybody, because a lot of people have been thanking you for sharing your story, have been honoring the memories that you shared of your parents, the legacy that they have left, um, how you see that every day in your kids. Uh, a lot of people have connected with all of that, and so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Well,
I don't
much
know how to jump.
love.
I don't know how to jump off IG Live, so I'll stay on here until you
Honestly,
kick me out.
I
Until you kick me out
honestly,
of here.
I don't know how to wrap that up either sometimes. So, just thank you, Amish, and thank you to your parents. Haruji and Renu, absolutely, would be extremely proud of, how you are, opening up and being so vulnerable. So, appreciate you, brother. Thank you, and take care.
You too.
Take care, everybody.